So when we think about D&D into the future, one of the ways that we're thinking about it is what can we offer our fans that are the best versions of things that they've never seen before and things that they may have experienced but they want more of.
And that's the thing that connects all of us, is that we all love D&D.
So what do you want to do?
Attack! Dragons are cool, and we like dragons.
What Jess is saying in that video is really interesting to me. And it goes back to something I was thinking about in a previous video that I did on the multiverse. If you hadn't seen that video and you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll put a link to it in the description below. But what Jess says in the opening of this video is that she's talking about bringing something to the fans of Dungeons and Dragons that they haven't seen before, that they might like, and giving them more of what they do like. And it's not obvious in that clip, but she's definitely talking about the digitization of Dungeons and Dragons, which has been in the works for quite some time. So this, if you don't know now, this channel is called The Philosophy of Game Mastering. And in it, I do a lot of speculating on what's happening in the game industry. This video will be more of that. And I think it's interesting because the Dungeons and Dragons is 50 years old. 2024 is the 50th year that Dungeons and Dragons has been released to the public. Obviously, it being 2024, Wizards of the Coast is going to digitize Dungeons and Dragons. But that's not really all they're going to do. They're going to do a lot more, and I'll explain. In a comment that I left on one of my older videos, someone was basically telling me, yeah, Joe, Wizards of the Coast is moving Dungeons and Dragons to the digital world. I know that, and I don't necessarily accept it, but I do see that. What Wizards is trying to do, or Hasbro more globally, is to turn the Dungeons and Dragons franchise into something as huge as Apple Computer, or just Apple, and the Marvel MCU. And I'll explain this in a minute. And this isn't probably anything new. I'm sure other people have speculated about this. But if you look at the MCU and all the movies that they had released over the last 10 or so years, it's made billions of dollars for Disney. Billions. Apple is a $1 trillion company. It's where Hasbro wants to take their company. If you look at Hasbro's main competitor throughout the years, that was Mattel. Mattel stock is in the toilet. Mattel is hurting because they are a toy manufacturer, as was Hasbro. Hasbro's purchase of Wizards of the Coast was their way into, I'm not going to say the tech world because it's not a tech company yet. It's turning into one. Hasbro purchased Wizards of the Coast because it was making a lot of money off of Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is 50 years old, as I said, and Hasbro saw that as something that they wanted to get into. Now the folks at Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro are looking at Apple Computer, they're looking at Apple, they're looking at the Marvel Universe and what Disney has done. Disney purchased Star Wars from George Lucas several years ago. This is the new way of the world. Things are being digitized. But I think the thing that most people don't understand is that Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast aren't just going for the consumer market, you and I, right? They're going for the business market as well. What they're trying to do is build an ecosystem that elevates not only the brand of Dungeons and Dragons and possibly Magic the Gathering, but it also elevates the company, Hasbro, as a technology digital company. And I'm gonna leave it there, and I'll pop back into this video here and there, but originally this video was around news in the TTRPG industry. I was gonna release this video yesterday, but it didn't seem complete to me because I make some comments throughout this video that I need to address, and I'll do that coming up as you're watching it. Anyway, if you're new here, please like and subscribe. Thanks for finding my channel. Please watch my other videos. You won't be disappointed. Thank you. Other tabletop gaming news, I wanted to call your attention to the Kickstarter for Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere RPG. It's currently at 13 million. I should really eat lunch before I make these videos. $324,967 with over 47,000 backers. There's 7 hours to go. And this is something that I've been watching for, ever since it launched. And I'm watching it mainly because of DC20 and how much the Dungeon Coach raised for DC20 on Kickstarter. Now, the important thing to notice here is that with all the news and talk of Wizards of the Coast and 50 Years of Dungeons and Dragons and the 2024 Player's Handbook, imminently going to be released in stores on September 3rd, which is next Tuesday. I think it's important to note that Wizards of the Coast, by moving more towards digital, and there's been a lot of talk about their virtual tabletop that's coming up. There was a recent D&D Beyond, I guess I'm going to call it a fiasco, where they weren't allowing the character builder to accept 2014 Player's Handbook spells without doing a homebrew, and Wizards of the Coast backtracked on that and said, "Oh no, we can do that still." So what I want to focus on here is by Wizards of the Coast moving towards a more digitized version of Dungeons and Dragons through their virtual tabletop, through their microtransactions and monthly subscription, however they're going to finance their billions of dollars that they want to make and put into their coffers, they're basically creating more competition for themselves, right? They already have pretty solid competition when it comes to like this Kickstarter, Dungeon Coach's Kickstarter, Shadowdark winning 3 Ennies earlier this month at Gen Con. It's incredible to see how tabletop role-playing games hasn't changed a whole lot and has changed a whole lot. And what Wizards of the Coast is really doing is, by creating a virtual tabletop and digitizing pretty much Dungeons and Dragons, they're creating more competition for themselves in the digital world. They're going to be competing with other game companies or other video game companies who are already doing an amazing job of basically collecting money through microtransactions. So Wizards of the Coast is stepping into what's called a new category. It's similar to when Apple decided they were going to make a phone.
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. And here it is.
So I want to interrupt this video here because I want to explain something about why I'm talking about Apple with regards to Wizards of the Coast. I'm not saying Wizards of the Coast is Apple, although the way I phrased it yesterday when I did that part of the video, that's what it sounded like. So when I was rewatching this in an edit, I said I need to talk about this. So I'm talking about this right now. As I mentioned earlier about Apple, Wizards of the Coast is trying to emulate the ecosystem that Apple has built over the years. It's a very strong ecosystem, and in fact, looking at what happened in the EU recently, Apple is basically a monopoly, and everybody kind of knows that, including the government, and they're like trying to, curb that monopoly, so to speak. And ironically, Hasbro owns Monopoly, but that has no connection. Future Joe out, earlier Joe back in, when phones had already existed for many, many years. But Apple is a very different company than Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro. Apple is what's called a category maker. And if you don't know what that term is, I can go into more detail on it in another video. Let's just do it right now. Let me talk about what I meant by a new category. So if you look at Apple was not the first company that created a personal computer. They weren't the first people or company that created a music player. They weren't the first people that created a phone or a headset. The way Apple markets their products is very different and unlike other companies. So as an example, when Apple decided to get into the music player market with the iPod, they didn't say, hey, look at our new iPod. It has, 10 megabytes of RAM and, 1 gig of storage. No, they weren't selling the features. They were selling the solution that people wanted.
iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket.
So their slogan was 1,000 songs in your pocket. And what that line does to you is it creates a story, and it immerses you in that story. It's you imagining yourself walking around listening to basically all of your songs. You know, you're not at home or in your car with a cassette or a CD or a record player. You are literally on the go listening to your songs in your pocket. And that's what Apple does well. So I just wanted to say that. But what Wizards of the Coast is doing is they are trying to fast follow in a market that they don't understand, and that is the digital market. We've seen some failures in the past when they tried to move away from selling their Magic cards at game stores and were trying to sell, God, I don't remember what it was. They were trying to sell some really rare boxes of Magic boosters on their own website, and it basically caused a flurry of rabid fans who were angry because the site kept crashing and they weren't able to get their hands on a product that they should have got their hands on at their local game store. It was like Taylor Swift crashing Ticketmaster. It was a disaster. But it's not all bad news. In fact, this next clip shows that Wizards of the Coast is starting to go back and support local stores. Here it is.
We can't say enough about how grateful we are to the local game store community. So how do we set it up so that they can create these amazing, beautiful play events? Part of the way that we're doing that is game stores will now get early access to our releases 2 weeks early. And those releases will be supported by play programs so that a store owner can go, hey, you've got your book early, and now here's some adventures to play along with it, with all of your friends in the store.
So that's all fine and well. Thank you, Wizards of the Coast, for supporting local game stores. Just so everybody knows, I used to own a game store. In fact, I used to own 2 different game stores at 2 different times. And it's very difficult as a small business to run a solid, profitable game store. So thank you, Wizards of the Coast, for supporting local game stores. Now, I'm going to continue with the video that talks a little bit about what I think Wizards of the Coast needs to do and where they're currently at. So Wizards of the Coast is an infant in the digital world. They have so much learning to do and growth that needs to happen really quickly if they want to be a player in that world. So I wish them the best of luck. We'll see what's going to happen over the next few years. I think 2027 is going to be a peak moment for Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, because if they can't get their S together by 2027, it's going to be not so pretty. Thanks for watching.
We're starting off on PC, but we want to go everywhere because we want to connect players across mobile, console, and I don't know, maybe even your fridge. Wherever you want to play, we want to be there at your fingertips.
There's one more thing I want to show you, and it's a preview of what I'm going to be talking about in a future video.
We're opening it up so you can bring in any kind of character you want, like fight Drizzt against a robot. You know, you'll be able to do that with all the groups that we're working with.